I broke my arm out here once, badly. Couldn't hunt, couldn't gather, couldn't carry anything. Useless. And you think that's where my story ends? Survival of the fittest. No doctors, no medicine, nobody coming. You think they left me? They didn't. And here's how we know. There's a skeleton in a cave in Iraq. A man who lived about 45,000 years ago. His right arm was withered and useless. He was blind in one eye. His skull had been crushed on one side. And he lived to somewhere between 40 and 50 years old, which is impossible on your own. Somebody fed that man for years. So let me show you 4 things about getting hurt out here that are going to rearrange your idea of what a caveman was. We performed surgery, real surgery, on skulls, and people survived it. We had medicine, actual chemically active medicine, thousands of years before your chemists showed up. And somebody out here survived having their leg cut off, 31,000 years ago. But the strangest part isn't any of the medicine. It's what it says about us. Hold that thought. Start here. When a wild animal breaks a leg badly, it usually dies. Not from the break. From everything the break stops it doing. Can't hunt, can't run, can't keep up. But dig up humans and you find something different. You find healed fractures. Bones that broke and then knitted back together straight, which means somebody set that bone and then somebody fed that person for the weeks it took to heal. And it goes further than broken arms. In Florida, they found a boy about 7,000 years old with a spine condition. He couldn't have walked properly. He lived to around 15. In Italy, a young man with dwarfism who couldn't have hunted, buried with care. In Vietnam, a paralyzed man who was looked after for a decade. So every time you picture us as brutes throwing our weak off a cliff, remember that the actual bones say the opposite. We carried them. Now here's where it gets genuinely hard to believe. We drilled holes in people's heads. On purpose. It's called trepanation, and it is one of the oldest surgical procedures we know about. Thousands of years old. Found on nearly every continent. Which raises the obvious question, and it's the one you're already asking. Did anyone actually live through it? Yes. And here's how we can tell. When bone gets injured and the person lives, the bone heals. It grows smooth rounded edges around the wound. And a lot of these skulls have exactly that. Smooth, healed rims. Somebody opened a person's skull with a stone tool, and that person got up and walked around afterwards. For years. Some skulls have 2 holes, some have more, which means somebody came back for a second round. Now, we don't fully know why. Maybe to relieve pressure after a head injury, maybe for pain, maybe for reasons we'd find strange. But whatever the reason, somebody knew where to cut, how deep to stop, and how to keep the patient alive. And if you think skulls are the limit, in Pakistan they found teeth from around 9,000 years ago that had been drilled neatly with a tool. Dentistry, before farming was even properly going. Medicine, and I want you to understand I don't mean rubbing mud on it and hoping. Scientists scraped the hardened plaque off Neanderthal teeth. Actual fossilized dental plaque. And inside it they found traces of poplar. Which sounds boring, until you know what's in poplar bark. Salicylic acid, which is the active ingredient in aspirin. That Neanderthal was chewing painkiller. And in the same mouth, traces of penicillium mold. The stuff penicillin comes from. Now, nobody is claiming they understood antibiotics, but something was making them chew the moldy thing when they felt bad, and that something worked often enough to become a habit. Elsewhere, chamomile and yarrow. Both bitter, neither nutritious, both medicinal. Why chew something bitter with no calories in it, unless it does something for you? And then there's the man they found frozen in a glacier. You've probably heard of him. He was carrying a specific fungus that happens to fight intestinal parasites. And guess what they found in his gut? Parasites. He was carrying the treatment for the exact thing he had. That's not luck. That's somebody knowing what a specific fungus is for. Okay, the one I've been saving. In a cave in Borneo, they found a young person who died about 31,000 years ago, and their lower left leg was gone. Not crushed, not chewed. Cut. Cleanly, above the ankle. And here's the part that matters. The bone had healed over the cut, which means they didn't die. They survived the operation, and then they lived another 6 to 9 years afterwards, in the jungle, on one leg. Think about everything that had to go right. Somebody had to know how to cut without the patient bleeding out. Somebody had to keep the wound from turning septic in a tropical rainforest. And then somebody had to carry that person, feed them, and protect them for years. 31,000 years ago. No metal, no hospital, no idea what a germ was. And it worked. So the obvious question is how? And the honest answer is we don't fully know, but we can guess at some of it. Honey, for one. Honey genuinely does fight bacteria, and it doesn't spoil. Pack a wound with it and you've made a dressing that works, whether or not you know why. Certain plants slow bleeding. Certain barks numb pain. Certain resins seal a wound shut. And here's the thing about a group like mine. We had generations to figure this out, and a very strong incentive to remember what worked. You think of us as having no knowledge because we had no writing. But I could name hundreds of plants and tell you what each one does. That's a library. It just lived in people's heads and got handed down. Lose one old person and you lose a chapter of it. Which is possibly why we looked after our old people so carefully. They were the medical textbook. But none of that answers the biggest question in all of this. Not how we healed people. Why we bothered. Because looking after a sick person is expensive. It costs food you could have eaten. It costs time you could have spent hunting. It slows the whole group down. If we were the cold survival machines you picture, we would not have done it. And yet everywhere anyone digs, they find the same thing. Broken bones set straight. Disabled people who lived for years. Old people kept alive long past their usefulness. Somebody drilled a hole in a man's skull and then nursed him back to health with a stone tool and no idea what an infection was. So here's what I actually want you to take from this. Caring for each other isn't something civilization taught us. It's not a modern invention. And it didn't arrive with hospitals or religion or laws. It's older than farming, older than writing, older than your species being the only kind of human on the planet. We were doing it with sharp rocks and plant bark and nothing else, because that's simply what we were like. I broke my arm out here and my people carried me. That's the oldest human thing there is. Not the spear, not the fire. That. Now, if we were looking after each other that well, and we knew that much about plants and bones and wounds, that leaves you with a fairly awkward question. How long did we actually live? Because you've been told cavemen dropped dead at 30. And that number is one of the most misleading things anybody ever taught you about me. I explain exactly why in the next one. It's on the screen right now. Go on. I'll be there.